A king died from a splintered lance at a celebration, and everyone watched. Today, 33 absurd sports moments from medieval times that sound completely fake. London banned football in 1314, and Venice raced boats for pure civic pride. Henry VIII lost a wrestling match in 1520, then demanded an archery rematch. Stay for number 33, because two skiers carry a future king through a blizzard. Mob football, the game that looked like a street riot. In April 1314, London officials threatened prison over a simple ball game. Merchants complained to King Edward II about chaos in the city of London. The mayor, Nicholas de Fondon, issued the ban on April 13, 1314. Players shoved huge leather balls through narrow streets, straight past market stalls. Neighbors heard constant shouting, then saw broken windows and bruised bodies afterward. Some matches spilled into churchyards, turning holy ground into a muddy scrum. Guards broke up crowds, and nobody wanted to admit they started it. The funniest part is, officials blamed the noise before they blamed injuries. After the proclamation, street games moved outside walls, then crept back anyway. 2. When kings banned golf and football to force archery practice. In March 1457, Scotland banned golf and football, like they were national emergencies. King James II pushed Parliament to stop men wasting daylight on games. England was the constant threat, and archery practice was the real obsession. Officials wanted longbowmen drilling at the butts, not chasing balls across fields. Villagers kept sneaking out anyway, quietly, because boredom always beats royal decrees. Some local courts fined offenders, and the same names showed up again and again. The ban lumped golf with football, as if both were equally dangerous distractions. Imagine getting scolded for swinging a club when you should be shooting arrows. By the late 1400s, the orders returned repeatedly because nobody actually quit. 3. Calcio Fiorentino. Florence bare-knuckle soccer war. On February 17, 1530, Florence played soccer during a siege just to flex. Emperor Charles V's forces surrounded the city openly, expecting fear and surrender. Instead, Florentines staged Calcio Storico in Piazza Santa Croce, loud and public. Players were nobles and soldiers, wearing colors, then punching like it was normal. The ball mattered, but pride mattered more, because the walls were starving. Drums and trumpets carried across rooftops all day, taunting the imperial camps. Matches allowed headbutts, elbows, and chokes, so the field became a wrestling pit. Spectators watched injuries pile up, while messengers nearby reported everything to commanders. Florence eventually fell that year, but that game became the city's favorite legend. 4. The Quintain, the training game that smacked knights off their horses. One misstrike at the Quintain could launch you into dirt in full armor. By the High Middle Ages, squires practiced jousting skills on a rotating target. A wooden shield sat on a pole, with an arm holding a heavy sandbag. Riding fast, hit the shield cleanly, and the arm spun like a windmill. Hit too softly, and the sandbag whipped around and smacked your back hard. Some trainees got knocked off their horses, then laughed at by onlookers. Better to be humiliated here than shamed in a real tournament lane. Villages set up quintains for festivals, so skill and gossip mixed together. It was basically medieval training, plus slapstick, plus a bruising physics lesson. 5. Tournament malaise, mass practice wars with real injuries. In 1139, church leaders tried banning tournaments because knights kept dying for fun. Pope Innocent II's council at Lateran called jousts and melees reckless show-offs. Canon law warned participants could lose Christian burial if they died competing. That tells you tournaments were not polite parades, but chaotic fights with lances. Groups of armored men met by agreement, then charged until somebody stopped moving. Horses crashed, helmets split, and squires dragged bodies away before the next pass. Some nobles treated it like practice war, even when real wars were nearby. Priests preached against it, while crowds still paid to watch the next collision. The ban never fully worked, because glory addiction is basically medieval caffeine. 6. Jousting lances built to shatter and still ruin you. Splintered wood was the whole point, and it still sent kings to surgeons. Tournament lances were often made to crack dramatically on impact for the crowd. Carpenters hollowed shafts and used softer wood, trying to reduce stabbing risks. Then riders aimed for shields and helmets anyway, because accuracy meant honor. One bad angle turned a harmless snap into razor shards flying toward visors. In Paris in June 15, 5019, that exact problem showed how fake safety can be. Even when rules banned sharp points, the fragments behaved like tiny spears. Courtiers cheered the explosion of wood, then panicked when blood followed it. A joust could look like theater, right until it suddenly became a funeral rehearsal. 7. The tilt yard, where nobles gambled fortunes on crashes. 2 days of tilting in February 1511 turned Westminster into a glamorous crash laboratory. Henry VIII hosted the Westminster tournament on February 12th and 13th, 1511. It celebrated the birth of Prince Henry on New Year's Day to Catherine of Aragon. Heralds delivered formal challenges, then crowds packed in tight for armored spectacle. Riders thundered down the lists, aiming lances at shields with practiced precision. Every hit shattered wood, and every miss meant a violent slam into barriers. Otis later recorded the pageantry on the Westminster tournament roll, like medieval highlights. Behind the glitter were bruises, concussions, and horses spooked by noise and banners. At court, bragging rights mattered so much that falling off was a public disaster. 8. When a joust killed a king, and nobody was shocked. On June 30th, 1559, a tournament celebration in Paris turned into royal catastrophe. King Henry II of France insisted on jousting, even after earlier matches looked rough. His opponent was Gabriel de Montgomery, captain of the Scottish Guard in France. Surgeons tried to remove fragments, while infection and swelling spread behind the face. Catherine de' Medici watched the court shift from cheering to whispering about succession. After 10 days of suffering, Henry II died on July 10, 1559. Montgomery was initially absolved, then quickly fled disgrace as politics turned poisonous. One shattered lance changed France's future faster than any treaty signed that week. 9. Viking Nataliker, the ball game that started blood feuds. In early 10th century Iceland, a ball game ended with a child killing someone. Nataliker shows up in Egil's saga, famously centered on Egil Skallagrimsson's family. The saga sets a match in western Iceland, where adults played as hard as warriors. 7-year-old Egil joined in, got manhandled, and took the humiliation completely personally. Families argued, pride escalated, and the sport became a legal and social mess. The ball was small, but the grudges were huge, like winter storms in miniature. That is why sagas treat games as serious business, not harmless recreation. If you think sports rivalries get toxic today, Iceland basically wrote the tutorial. 10. Hurling in Ireland, stick fighting with a ball. In 1366, Irish hurling was considered dangerous enough to outlaw in writing. English authorities met in Kilkenny under Lionel, Duke of Clarence, to clamp down. Among many rules, the statute explicitly banned hurling, meaning the stick and ball game. That tells you matches were not gentle, but loud collisions with ash sticks. Players swung hurleys at a hard slyatar, and spectators stood way too close. Officials worried games encouraged gatherings, fights, and loyalty outside local English control. Yet the ban also proves the sport was already popular across Gaelic Ireland. People kept playing anyway, because you cannot legislate away tradition with parchment. The next fair day, someone tossed a ball, and the crowd instantly forgot the statute. 11. Shinty in Scotland. Winter Games on frozen ground. By around 1600, Highland Scots were smashing a ball across ice with caman sticks. In Gaelic, the game was called Iamain, or Camanachd, long before Shinty became common. Winter froze Lawson fields, and villages treated the ice like a free stadium. Teams met after church holidays, then sprinted in heavy wool, slipping everywhere. The ball skittered low, sticks cracked, and hands got numb within minutes. A hard hit could send the ball into heather, and the chase restarted instantly. Elders argued about boundaries because snow makes every line disappear on contact. Nobody wore padding, so bruises were treated like proof you actually played. Even the name changed over time, but the chaos stayed perfectly recognizable. 12. La Soule, France's no-rules village ball battle. By the 1100s in northern France, La Soule turned villages into moving brawls. Players used hands, feet, and even sticks to shove a heavy ball forward. The goal might be a church door, a riverbank, or a landmark miles away. Crowds swarmed through fields, then spilled into streets, crushing fences and carts. Local rivalries mattered, so cousins tackled cousins, and grudges lasted through Lent. In 1331, King Philip VI reportedly banned the game after repeated disorder. That did not stop Shrovetide crowds, who treated bands like background noise. A match could last hours, ending only when someone reached the target exhausted. When people call modern sports violent, the Soule is sitting there, quietly laughing. 13. Shrovetide football, annual chaos as a community tradition. In 1533, officials in Chester tried stopping Shrovetide football because the town kept exploding. The mayor banned the game on Shrove Tuesday, after years of broken windows. Tradition said it began at the Rue de Cross, and everyone knew the route. Men poured into streets, wrestling over one ball, while shopkeepers barricaded doors. Some players wore work clothes, others carried sticks, and nobody had neutral status. Spectators shouted bets, then jumped aside when the scrums slammed into stone walls. Afterward, the town counted damages, blamed outsiders, and pretended it was unusual. Next year, the crowd gathered again, somehow, because memory resets every February. Shrovetide football was less a match and more a scheduled civic stress test. 14. Stool ball, the medieval game that feels like proto-baseball. By 1450, stool ball was already named, and people played it around Easter. In Sussex, young men and women met outdoors, mixing courtship with competition. A simple stool became the target, like a low wicket you had to defend. Early versions were hand-hit, then bats appeared, because palms can only take so much. Folk stories say milkmaids used milking stools and bowls, turning chores into equipment. One clean strike brought cheers, while a hit stool ended the rally immediately. Because it was social, losing could feel like public embarrassment, not just a score. Games drifted slowly between villages, spreading rules through gossip instead of rule books. It is proto-baseball energy, except everyone is dressed for Sunday church afterward. 15. Jeu de paume, the handball that became tennis. By the 1100 in France, people played tennis without raquets and called it jeu de paume. It literally means palm game because the first equipment was your own hand. Players slapped a leather ball against walls, then chased rebounds like desperate monks. Gloves appeared, then padded mitts, because skin loses arguments with leather quickly. By the late Middle Ages, courts moved indoors, and nobles treated it like fashion. Servants fetched balls, while spectators judged grace as much as athletic skill. Eventually, paddles and rackets arrived, but the name stubbornly stayed the same. English speakers later shortened it to tennis, like they were inventing it. The game kept evolving, but the basic idea was still hit it, survive it, repeat. 16. Royal tennis courts inside palaces. At Hampton Court, a tennis court became political scenery long before it became a museum. Cardinal Thomas Wolsey built the court between 1526 and 1529 for royal leisure. Henry VIII played there by 1528, treating real tennis like a daily obsession. Courtiers watched from galleries, while balls ricocheted off walls in controlled chaos. The court was indoors, so weather never saved you from losing in public. Later stories say Anne Boleyn was gambling on tennis when her arrest arrived. Imagine collecting winnings, then being marched to the tower, still thinking about points. The building survived dynasties, refits, and centuries of fashion changing around it. Sports were never separate from power, especially when the king held the racket. 17. Festival wrestling, kings, pride, and wagers. In June 15, 2020, a luxury festival near Calais suddenly turned into an awkward wrestling defeat. Henry VIII met Francis I between Ardres and Guisnes for the Field of Cloth of Gold. The festival ran from June 7th to June 24th, 1520, packed with games and jousts. Henry impulsively challenged Francis to wrestle, with thousands of witnesses packed around them. Francis quickly threw Henry, and English courtiers pretended they did not see it. Henry tried saving face by challenging Francis to archery, because longbows were safer pride. Meanwhile, Breton and Cornish wrestlers performed bouts for spectators hungry for violence. Banquets continued, but the mood shifted because humiliation lingers longer than wine. Musicians kept playing, but jokes about the throw followed Henry for weeks. 18. Staff and buckler prize fights in city streets. In Tudor London, earning a fencing rank meant fighting in public while strangers judged you. From about 1540 onward, the London Masters of Defense held events called Playing the Prize. A student announced his prize, hired a venue, and invited challengers to test him. Spectators paid to watch bouts with sword and buckler, staff, or other approved weapons. You fought multiple rounds, facing fresh opponents, while fatigue turned footwork sloppy. Friends shouted advice, enemies shouted insults, and the referee cared mostly about order. Winning did not guarantee safety because a broken hand still ended your career. The prize ended with formal recognition, then a feast, because London loved ceremonies. It was sport, theater, and street survival training squeezed into one noisy afternoon. 19. Fencing guilds and public master exams. In 1487, German fencers basically got a corporate license to be scary professionals. Emperor Frederick III granted privileges to the Brotherhood of St. Mark, the Marksbrüder. They claimed authority over the title master of the long sword across the empire. Training happened in cities like Frankfurt, where public bouts drew crowds and wagers. A candidate fought set exchanges, proving control, courage, and endurance under pressure. Victories earned status, but one sloppy cut could end everything in a heartbeat. Guild politics mattered too, because monopolies create fast enemies with sharp steel. Rival groups argued publicly over legitimacy, turning fencing into bureaucracy with bruises. The result was an early martial sports system, complete with exams and branding. 20. Archery laws, mandatory practice or a fine. Miss archery practice in medieval England, and you could be fined for laziness. In 1252, the assize of arms required many men to keep. Then in 1363, Edward III pushed Sundays and holidays as mandatory shooting time. Parishmen walked to the butts after church, carrying bows like ordinary tools. Officials complained people preferred football, dice, and other games over target practice. So kings kept issuing reminders, because a longbow army needs muscle memory. Teenagers learned early, drawing heavy warbows until shoulders ached for days. Competitions formed naturally, since nobody wants to be the worst shot in town. By the 100 Years' War, the habit mattered, because battles demanded quick volleys. 21. Longbow contest that doubled as war training. A village archery contest could end with the winner marching to war weeks later. During Edward III's campaigns, recruiters wanted men who could shoot fast and far. At butts outside towns, archers practiced distance, timing, and shooting in volleys. Neighbors judged shots, then bet small coins on who split the target's center. Hands blistered, strings snapped, and someone always lost arrows in the hedges. In 1346 at Crécy, those boring drills turned into storms of arrows over France. The same muscles used for Sunday practice now decided life against armored knights. After battles, survivors returned home, and the next contest felt suddenly serious. Medieval sport and medieval warfare shared one secret: repetition until it becomes reflex. 22. Crossbow controversies: sport, weapon, or sin. In 1139, the Church tried banning crossbows against Christians, like a medieval arms control treaty. The Second Lateran Council under Pope Innocent II condemned crossbows and bows in civil wars. Canon 29 drew a line: do not use that deadly art on fellow Catholics. On paper, it sounded strict, but battlefields rarely follow paperwork and sermons. By 1199, King Richard I was hit by a crossbow bolt at Chaillot-Chabrol. The wound turned gangrenous, and Richard died on April 6, 1199, still campaigning. People saw irony in a king dying from a weapon once damned as hateful. Commanders kept hiring crossbowmen anyway, because armor does not care about theology. The controversy never ended. It just moved from councils to castle walls. 23. Falconry challenges: hunting as elite sport. In the 1240s, Emperor Frederick II turned falconry into science and royal competition. He wrote De Arte Venandi Comavibus, mixing hunting advice with bird experiments. Frederick tested whether vultures used smell by covering their eyes during searches. He compared hawks, trained them carefully, and treated each flight like a measured trial. At court, nobles watched raptors dive, then argued whose bird had better nerve. A good falcon could win prestige, gifts, and invitations to the next hunt. A bad flight meant embarrassment, because everyone saw the bird ignore your command. Handlers carried leather hoods, jesses, and lures, turning birds into living weapons. Medieval sports sometimes looked gentle, until you realized it was predator management. 24. Boar hunts as high-risk status games. On April 1, 1143, a boar hunt killed a Byzantine emperor in the most unlucky way. John II Komnenos was hunting when an arrow nicked him and caused a serious wound. Sources described the arrow as poisoned, turning a small cut into fatal infection. The hunt was supposed to display courage, with spears, dogs, and mounted nobles. Instead, the emperor's party rushed to treat him, realizing the injury would not stop bleeding. John's condition worsened, and the empire suddenly faced an immediate succession crisis. Hodie, who had been cheering minutes earlier, now whispered about heirs and rivals. Boar hunts were status games, but wild animals do not respect status titles. In medieval courts, one bad moment in the woods could rewrite politics overnight. 25. Bear baiting as mainstream entertainment. By the 1560s in Southwark, London crowds paid to watch bears fight dogs for entertainment. The venue was the Bear Garden on Bankside, across the Thames from the city. Maps and records show baiting rings near theaters, because violence sold tickets reliably. Bearwards managed chained animals, while gamblers shouted odds like it was sports betting. Some visitors came on Sundays, mixing church habits with a very different ritual. John Stowe later described the place as the Beer Garden, commonly called Paris Garden. The building shifted locations over time, but the reputation stayed fixed in minds. People treated it as normal leisure, even when it looked like organized cruelty. It is hard to call that sport, but medieval London absolutely did. 26. Bull baiting and the business of blood sports. In Stamford, England, a bull run on November 13th turned a holiday into controlled panic. The Stamford Bull Run was held on St. Brice's Day, mixing bull running and baiting. Accounts say it lasted for perhaps over 600 years, surviving complaints and injuries. A bull was released, men chased it through streets, and dogs were set on it. Spectators lined windows, because nobody wanted to be on ground level near horns. The event became a local identity badge, even when outsiders called it disgraceful. Authorities tried suppressing it, but tradition has a stubborn grip on towns. Only in 1839 did the practice finally stop, after repeated pressure and conflict. For centuries, Stamford treated terror as festive entertainment, like a seasonal sport. 27. Cockfighting and cockpennies, betting before Lent. On Shrove Tuesday in England, some schoolboys paid cockpennies and watched birds fight. Records describe a cockpenny sometimes collected by headmasters, tied to Shrovetide traditions. At certain grammar schools, the day included cockfighting as a loud winter spectacle. Boys crowded around a cockpit, cheering, learning gambling habits very surprisingly early. The victor won bragging rights, while the losers handed over coins and excuses. Teachers tolerated it as custom, even though the noise sounded like a tavern brawl. Outside schools, cockfights also drew local adult crowds, mixing drinking with wagers. Later laws banned animal fighting, but the earlier culture proved how normal it felt. It is a reminder that medieval fun often had a very sharp edge. 28. Stone lifting feats to prove you're strong enough. In Scotland, lifting one specific stone could decide whether you were treated like a man. Clan traditions used manhood stones, clochqui de fer, as strength tests for youths. A candidate had to raise the stone to waist height in front of witnesses. A lot of the battles. Fail, and you were not mocked publicly, but you definitely were remembered privately. Succeed, and older men nodded, because strength signaled usefulness in hard climates. Some stones sat near village paths, so travelers could be challenged instantly. The stones were irregular, so technique mattered, not just raw gym strength. Hands slipped on rein, and one mistake meant smashed toes and instant regret. It is the simplest sport imaginable. Rock, lift, survive, and earn your reputation. 29. Caber-style log throws and Highland strength rituals. A single log toss could decide who impressed the clan chief at a summer gathering. In Scotland, the caber toss later became famous at Highland Games as a strength event. Similar log or bar casting was popular in England by the 16th century. Competitors lifted a tapered pole, ran, then flipped it end over end. It was not about distance, but about a clean turn and straight landing. Grip mattered because sweaty hands turned a caber into a falling tree hazard. Spectators watched for perfect timing, then groaned when the log crashed sideways. Strong men trained with hard farm work, turning daily labor into athletic advantage. Every throw looked simple, until your shoulders realized physics has no mercy. 30. Messenger runs between cities. Endurance as a job requirement. Delivering a royal message could mean running until your legs felt like fire. English records show royal messengers, called nuncii, or cursors, active by the early 1100s. Some traveled by foot, others by horse, depending on speed and secrecy needs. They carried writs to sheriffs and mayors, moving in circuits to keep the king informed. Rain ruined roads, bridges failed, and bandits loved lonely couriers with documents. A messenger might sleep in barns, then start again before sunrise. No excuses allowed. In 1485, a king's messenger named John Norman was appointed to hand-deliver secrets. That job was endurance plus trust, because a lost letter could start a war. So, yes, medieval running was sometimes just serious government logistics with blisters. 31. Ice skating on bone runners. A 1,000-year-old skate made from bone shows medieval people slid on ice for transport. In Przerov, in today's Czech Republic, archaeologists found a bone skate in a cellar area. It had a curved tip and drilled holes where straps once tied it to footwear. Instead of pushing like modern skaters, users shuffled and stabbed sticks into ice. Similar bone skates appear at Viking-era sites across northern Europe, suggesting shared tricks. The point was, speed on frozen rivers. Not fun, though fun probably happened anyway. One wrong step meant face-first impact, because bone runners do not forgive wobbling. Imagine hauling supplies in winter, then discovering you can glide instead of slogging. Medieval innovation often looked like this: simple materials, clever physics, and cold courage. 32. Horse racing and noble bragging rights. By 1174 in London, horse racing was already a spectacle at Smithfield's annual fair. Writer William Fitzstephen described strong and fast horses being matched for speed. The event happened during Henry II's reign, alongside trading, livestock, and crowds. Riders showed off breeding, then pushed mounts hard across open ground near the market. Spectators judged legs, lungs, and temperament, like they were scouting war horses. Victories brought bragging rights, and good bloodlines suddenly became real valuable currency. Losers argued about footing, tack, and riders because excuses were invented early. Over time, nobles turned racing into organized meetings, but fairs kept the wild energy. The turf culture began with simple dares, then grew into a national obsession. 33. Maypole Games, athletic flexing disguised as a festival. By the 1300s in England, May Day meant athletic showing off around a towering pole. Early records place Maypole celebrations in the 14th century, then spreading widely by the 1400s. Villagers cut a tall tree, hauled it in, and raised it like a seasonal monument. Young men competed carrying it, digging holes, and balancing ropes as it tilted dangerously. Then dancing began, turning strength work into a ribbon maze that never stays neat. Musicians played, couples flirted, and rivals tried outjumping each other in nearby games. After dark, the party got louder because spring festivals always invite trouble. Some authorities complained about disorder, but nobody wanted to cancel May entirely. It was fitness, flirting, and chaos wrapped in flowers, then called a wholesome tradition.